Okay, good morning, everybody. You're very welcome. I'm just waiting for a few people to join here now. We just give a few minutes for people to join. They're just joining in there now. So you're very welcome to this morning's webinar. Countdown to Brexit, 50 days to go. It's hard to believe that time is moving on so quickly. And we're just delighted that so many of you could join us today. And I'm really looking forward to this morning's session. And delighted to welcome Deirdre Maguire of Brexit, from Brexit Advisory Service Manager with Intertrade Ireland, Joanna Cunningham, who is the Invest NI representative on data compliance, and from Arthur Cox with us this morning. You're very welcome, Joanna. And we have Seamus Lehenny as well from Logistics UK, who has just run fresh from another webinar there into this one, and probably has another one after this, more than likely. So really delighted that you could join us again, particularly Deirdre and Seamus, who've been very kind with their time in supporting our members here in the Northwest. Just a bit about the event overview that you received. Look, it's the third webinar of our Countdown to Brexit series, and our panel assesses the current knowns and unknowns of Brexit and how this will impact on Northern Ireland's unique trading position with Europe, and what opportunities and I suppose some challenges that it brings. At this critical time, it is essential that businesses are clear on the steps they need to take. Time is of the essence, and deal or no deal, businesses must act to protect trade flows and to be alert to changes and new guidance. And registering for the trader support services is highly advisable, and our panel will explain why. And we had a webinar last week with the TSS actually, and we're trying to reinforce that message as well. So you have the option to text questions as we go through the webinar there via the text icon at the bottom of your screen. And we'll endeavour to submit all our questions to the panel as we go through the webinar. And if you have any questions that are not answered, we'll certainly try and get back to you afterwards. But before we start, could I just ask you to put your microphones on mute, and this will ensure and minimise interference. So I'd like to introduce the panel this morning to you. We've Deirdre Maguire from Intertrade Ireland. You're very welcome again, Deirdre. Deirdre has a wide range of experience working with SMEs, is a Bachelor of Financial Services, and previously worked with Ulster Bank in both retail and in business banking over 20 years, and in a range of positions. Thanks very much, Deirdre, for joining us. We have Joanna Cunningham as well, who is joining us as the Invest NI representative on data compliance, and is from Arthur Cox. And Joanna is an associate solicitor in the corporate and commercial team in the Arthur Cox Belfast office. She has extensive experience in advising on both contentious and non-contentious data compliance and data protection matters. And I know this is a particular challenging area, the GDPR bit, and we were just saying yesterday as a kind of a precursor to this call that GDPR was difficult to understand at the best of times. And it was just about getting traction within a lot of organizations of what they can and can't do. And now we're into a new area of data compliance that we're trying to get some clarity on for business. And last but not least, we have Seamus Lehenny from Logistics UK. Seamus Lehenny is the policymaker for Logistics UK in Northern Ireland, representing the interests of business involved in all elements of logistics and supply chains and transport. And as we've said on previous calls, I mean, it really is such a challenging time to understand exactly what we need to do to move product from A to B, where it would have been a lot simpler before. Now we have these things that we need to take off, and hopefully cover a lot of those challenges now this morning. But maybe, Deirdre, I could start with you, if that's okay. We were chatting yesterday, and you were saying that certainly the rate of interaction with Intertrade Ireland has certainly increased, and you just might give us a feel for what type of questions you're being asked now and what people are still concerned about. If you could, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, I started myself to think what's changed since we last chatted, and things definitely have, although there hasn't been anything massively tangible. So it is obviously the business interaction that is definitely ramping up. And I suppose the key things that are coming up now, both for us as Intertrade Ireland to giving out sort of a steer, and also to companies who are asking questions, are in these areas, okay? So we're getting lots and lots of businesses asking questions about how to find their commodity codes. Yeah, and I know I've mentioned that before, but it is very, very, very topical at the moment. And so there are ways that you can do that, but businesses again are just very cautious that they want to make sure they've got their own codes and the right codes. The other thing that we're seeing is a lot of questions coming in VAT. Seamus will probably be close to some of the negotiations on this, but I know we're still waiting on more information. But I suppose just on the VAT thing, the message that we're trying to get out to businesses is that, you know, VAT will be relevant to trade in goods and trade in services, and there will be differences in how a Northern Ireland business will report those things. And so the other things then within trade and goods that are coming up, I suppose we're getting in questions about, you know, like labelling and CE marking. So there's lots of stuff coming in about that. And when we're going back to businesses in that area, we're also highlighting the fact about organic produce, which is one thing that's coming up a lot. So if you have organic produce, you need to do some due diligence there, and perhaps look at registering your product if you want to continue to operate, depending on where your products are sourced. And the other thing that's coming out, I suppose, is SPS checks. Lots of questions on that. Potentially, maybe Seamus will touch on it with the Trader Support Service. I know there will be support, but lots of questions on the trade with Northern Ireland to GB to Northern Ireland, and in particular for food, animal and plant origin products, and what businesses need to do in that. And the other thing I wanted to call out is like EORI numbers. So if you haven't, as a business, got your EORI number, which I'm assuming everybody has now, you'll need one for both GB and one for NI. And again, the Trader Support will be helping on that maybe. Yeah, so that's
so Deirdre, I think what we can do is we can direct people to your recommended websites, and also we can put in the link again for the TSS as well, for people to log on to that after the webinar.
Definitely.
And register that. And is that where they get their EORI number? Is it through the TSS, or where do they access that number from?
So you can't get it yourself, okay? But if you go and register with the Trader Support System, they're going to get it for you. So it makes sense.
And what I understand from the TSS as well is that once you're on that, then you're on their mailing list, which means they have a lot of training sessions as well, which people can tap into and keep them informed as they're going closer to, because it's a moving feast here, and they're really encouraging a lot of businesses, particularly small businesses, because they have quite a high uptake on larger businesses. Yeah. Smaller businesses need to engage a bit more, I guess, is what the feeling I'm getting from them. So the sooner they can register there, the best. And we put that link on after the webinar so that our members can jump on that. I think it's a very straightforward process as far as I know, Deirdre.
Yeah, it is. And they also, whenever you do register, you'll get emails from them with the training links, which you can access on demand, you know, and they are quite good. So yeah,
brilliant. Look, Deirdre, we'll come back to you later. Thanks a million for that. Joanna, just come on to you there. I suppose if we start, you know, maybe the first question is, how are data transfers going to be impacted by the end of the EU transition period? I know it's a interesting subject for sure for many the GDPR area, you know. So if you could keep it as simple as you can for our members, just to understand the practical things that they may need to think about in that question.
No problem, Paul. Well, really, this will come down to whether we have obtained an adequacy decision from the EU Commission. So an adequacy decision would simply mean that the EU Commission views the UK as offering an equivalent level of data protection to that of the EU. And this is relevant because the EU GDPR as EU-derived legislation is not going to apply to us at the end of the transition period. So if we receive an adequacy decision, in a nutshell, data transfers continue as normal. There's nothing else to worry about. The problem is that it's now looking very unlikely that we're going to have an adequacy decision by the end of the transition period, which means then that transfers of personal data coming from the EEA into the UK will need to have an additional safeguard put in place. And these safeguards are set out under Article 46 of the GDPR. It's also worth noting quickly that we are going to implement an equivalent piece of legislation to the EU GDPR called the originally named UK GDPR. But for the purposes of the EU GDPR, we're still going to be what is called a third country. And that really just means, as I've said, we'll need to have an additional safeguard in place then to receive personal data in from the EU.
So if we're in a bit of a vacuum then come January, what do we do? I mean, from a practical point of view, what do businesses do if they want to share data?
So really, the additional safeguards under Article 46 are your first port of call. So there's the binding corporate rules, the standard contractual clauses, and then there's also another safeguard, the approved codes of conduct. Now, no codes of conduct have been published yet, so that's really null and void at present. The other two, the binding corporate rules and the standard contractual clauses, should be given consideration. The binding corporate rules really are an internal code of conduct that would apply to all entities within a corporate group. So they would really only be applicable for large multinational companies. And once they would be implemented, they would cover all data transfers within that corporate group. The main drawback of the binding corporate rules is that the approval process is so long, it can take a couple of years to actually get them put in place. So if your organisation is at the point now where it's considering what safeguard it may need, I would not advise that you go down the BCR route at this point, just given the interest of timing. The alternative is the standard contractual clauses. And again, I'm sure all of you have heard a lot about these elusive standard contractual clauses. So these are really just standard clauses developed by the EU Commission. They're easy enough to implement, and they just really cover different data transfers. So they apply for controller to controller transfers from the EEA to a third country, which the UK will probably be at the end of the transition period. And they also cover then data transfers where the controller is based in the EEA and the processor is based in a third country, such as the UK. So the SCCs are recognised by the ICO as probably being the most applicable additional safeguard that companies can put in place, and SMEs in reality aren't going to have another option but the standard clauses. The main drawback currently with the clauses is that they don't apply to all transfer scenarios. So you may have picked up when I was explaining the two different sets. They don't apply if you're a controller based in the UK and you have a processor in the EU, but as I'm sure many of you are aware, even data processors sometimes will be sending then personal data back, and controllers will obviously be sending it across to processors. So it's often a two-way street. So we do need, hopefully, to get another set of clauses put in place to address that. And my understanding is the ICO is in the process of updating the clauses. But again, we're just waiting to see when the updates will be published.
Okay, oh, very good, very good. And is there anything else companies can do if no safeguards apply? Maybe you've touched on that now already.
Yes, so there are derogations under Article 49 of the GDPR. Now, the derogations are narrowly defined and they're really only intended to apply as a last resort. So ideally, you need to try and see, first of all, if there is an additional safeguard, and if not, then you may want to look at the derogations under Article 49. So the main ones that I've seen in practice that some of my clients have tried to rely upon are that the data subject has explicitly consented to their personal data being sent outside of the EU. But again, this would really only be relevant if the data transfers were applying to a small amount of data subjects, because from a practical perspective, you're not going to be able to obtain explicit consent of every data subject if you're talking about upwards of 100, for example. The other one is the transfer is necessary for the performance of a contract between a data controller and another natural or legal person concluded in the interests of a data subject, or that the transfer is necessary for performance of contract between a controller and a data subject. So even the drafting of that, it's if the transfer is necessary, so that puts the threshold quite high. There's also another fallback derogation, and that's the compelling legitimate interests one. So basically, if the data controller has compelling legitimate interests that aren't overridden by the data subject's rights and freedoms. I appreciate that's a bit of a mouthful, but in reality, that's going to be hard to rely upon as well, because it's subject to caveats. So if you want to rely on that derogation, you need to obtain the consent of both the data subjects and the ICO. And the GDPR says that that's only intended to apply to data processing that isn't regular. So as you can see, that the derogations on paper can sound quite appealing sometimes, but then when you actually look into them, they're so narrowly defined that they're actually quite hard to rely upon.
Okay, Joanna, look, thanks very much for that. And we'll come back to you. We'll come back to you again on that, because it's a complex subject area, really, to grasp, but very, very important one as well, that and I suppose it's really revisiting your contracts to make sure you have the right clauses in there to protect yourself as well.
It's so important to do that.
And I think what I'd really like to do, if we can, in terms of our membership, would be to simplify it as much as possible, to give them really clear steps on what they can do to protect their business.
Yep, I can run through the key steps to take.
Yeah, and we'll do that. Maybe we'll take that before the end of the
Yeah,
call. That'd be great.
no problem.
Seamus, just coming on to you there, I suppose just the last one we had it at 75 days, and a lot hadn't changed really from the 100 days from memory, and we were still saying the same things, you know, check your supply chain and a lot of the things that Deirdre covered on there. Have you any further information, any other advice you'd like to give our members?
Yeah, probably the first thing, I think, you know, Deirdre talked about it there, the trader support service. If you're not registered for that, you know, you need to do it ASAP, get in there. I think last week we were close to about 4,000 registered businesses on the TSS. The target was, the government laid down a target of 10,000. So it just shows you there's still a lot of businesses there that haven't registered. And I think there's a lot of, certainly SMEs are thinking, do you know what, our carrier will look after this for us, but they won't. Use the traders responsible for getting that raw data, giving it to the TSS, who basically what the TSS is going to be a digital platform that will do a simplified declaration on your behalf, and also the safety security declaration that's required. They'll also give some advice and training. But the key thing is that the advice that they give will not be bespoke to your operations. So they're going to have like a contact center. It opened, actually, they've got a call center. But if you call up with a bespoke scenario for your business and ask them questions that maybe you would be inclined to ask your own customs broker, they won't be able to answer that. They won't go away and say, you know what, give us a few hours, we'll go and look into that for you. They'll be able to give you generic advice, but they can't give you any bespoke advice. So obviously that's where the likes of yourself, the chamber, is going to be key for a lot of businesses, because you will be the people, and if they have a customs broker, to give them that advice for them. We've not moved on. The clock's been ticking. You're quite right, Paul, and not a lot has moved on. Basically, what we're looking at, the 15th of November, this Sunday, is the latest date that a trade deal can be ratified. What it looks like is that, you know, the EU, the UK are in their tunnel this week, working away on getting that trade deal. Now, the Northern Ireland Protocol through the Special Joint Committee ought to be meeting at the same time in their tunnel. They're not. What's going to happen is that basically, hopefully we get the trade deal by the end of this week, and then the officials on the UK and EU side will then enter a new tunnel for the Joint Committee on the Northern Ireland Protocol. So they're going to fudge it a little bit with us, give them some breathing space for a couple of weeks to iron out the details. And we've seen in the news yesterday, the First and Deputy First Minister have written to the EU saying, please give us some flexibility to make sure the critical supply chains around food can still come in here. And that's welcome. Probably that letter should have been sent maybe at least 6 months ago. I know we've been banging on the door, and other, you know, industry reps have been saying we needed that, because the border control posts that facilitate those checks on sanitary and phytosanitary products haven't even started construction yet. You know, I looked at the Belfast site yesterday, and it's still, there's no ground's been broken there. And the scope of these buildings, they're high spec buildings, they'll take at least 6 months to build. So the thing that we're pushing for on this, Paul, is that we want to see a phased introduction of the SPS controls for the food products. So customs is going to happen 1st of January. Those customs controls will be in place. What we want to see is some flexibility from the EU, where they will say, okay, we'll give a bit of a Bible, because obviously factories in England manufacturing food, they're not going to change overnight how they make that food, and the EU have to recognize that, just to make sure the shops can still get the stuff here. But what we're pushing for is a retail movement system, is where if you're a retailer or a wholesaler and you're moving goods into Northern Ireland for sale strictly in your stores in Northern Ireland, is that you can avail of a trusted trader type scheme where you're audited. You can be audited at any time, both by DERA officials and by the EU officials who will be on the ground here from the first. And what that does, it does away with the need for the export health certificates, safety security declaration for every consignment, instead of a truck level safety security declaration. And it means when the goods arrive into Belfast, there's no SPS controls. You simply go down a green lane and you deliver. So there's a bit of, you know, we're asking for the EU to flex the rules a little bit, even just for the short term, give us 6-9 months until we have the infrastructure in place. And as well as that, a lot of the manufacturers in England, they're still not even clear on the labelling instructions that they need for the products they sell over here. So it's a big few weeks ahead of us, and it's critical that shops, and also the parcel industry is the other one. You know, I've spoken to one member of ours who delivers internet shopping to households here in Northern Ireland. they're moving around about 30,000 consignments a day into Northern Ireland. So in theory, they would need to do 30,000 safety security declarations and import declarations. That makes no sense.
No,
because internet retailers, all of a sudden, what will happen if they're met with that cost is that when you go onto a website to buy something, like what you see in the insurance adverts on the UTV in the evening, there'll be a little asterisk saying, sorry, we don't sell into Northern Ireland, or there's a surcharge if they do. So we need to avoid that. And again, same principle for the retailers. We get that truck level safety security declaration, one declaration per truck. And we get basically that, checks can be done at the distribution centers. So it's a huge hill we've got to climb and limited time.
Okay, and so the TSS really is the Trader Support Service is really important to log into that as a starting point. I think we took
completely,
yeah.
Yeah,
so that's something. So I guess, is there anything else that we can do now? I know we're waiting for the tunnels, the various tunnels to come out with white smoke. Is there anything else we can do in the interim as well as booking onto
it's just looking at your supply chain. I seen there was one question in the comments there. It's looking at your supply chain where there's potential gaps. Is there something coming in here even temporarily? What do we need to do to make sure we're kept legal on that? It's as Deirdre says there. It's getting your commodity codes, having your ERI number, things like that. Just having all your ducks in a row and ready. The Trader Support Service goes live on the 21st of December. So if for example, if you've arranged that you're going to lift a pallet of goods from your supplier in Birmingham on the 5th of January and you've got all the details, the invoice, well, you can submit that data on the 21st of December and have it all lined up and ready to go for that collection and movement.
Yeah. So maybe as you refer to that question, let me do that. And thanks, Deirdre, for putting that link in there as well. That link you've sent there now gets us where, Deirdre? You've just sent it in there. I see you've two links put in there, is it?
So I'm not a customs expert, I know that every business is different and it depends on what you're doing with your goods. But I would say very, very rightly, as Seamus said, the Trader Support Service should be able to direct and give you the generic advice. The links I've just put in there are inward and outward processing links. So I would say go in and have a look and see if you fit any of the criteria for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you do me a favor? Could you just send that to everybody, all panelists and everybody on the call, would you? And I can send it off. So is that possible to do that? You've sent it just to all panelists there, I think.
Oh, I did. Sorry, apologies.
No, that's fine. No, fine. If you could just do that, that'd be brilliant because they'll get it straight away, and we'll send it out with the transcript of the call this morning as well. Maybe I'll just go to the question that was asked there. From Stephen there, he says, we import parts from customers, manufacturers in GB to NI, clean them, and then export them back to GB manufacturer. Which customs procedures will we need to comply with?
That's the links that you put in there, yeah.
Yeah, exactly what Deirdre, that inward processing relief, that's what they do. Yeah.
Right, that's grand, okay. Lovely stuff. Coming back to you, Joanna, maybe just on the GDPR area there, another question for you there. What practical steps can companies take now to prepare for the end of the transition period?
Well, firstly, I would advise companies to go back and revisit their data mapping. As part of initial GDPR preparations, a lot of companies carried out a data mapping exercise, which really just sets out where they're sending their data to and also where they're receiving it from. And I think knowledge is key to compliance in this regard, and you need to know where your data is going and where it's coming from. So by going back and refamiliarizing yourself with this, it'll be helpful because it'll enable you to see if you do need to implement any of the safeguards, such as the standard contractual clauses. And just on that point, I would start going through your different suppliers, customers, check where they're based and see whether you do need to put those clauses in place. The clauses are very, very straightforward. You just download them off the EU Commission website. The ICO also has a very useful resource called the Interactive Tool, and it will help guide you through which set of clauses you will need to put in place. And it also just gives you guidance then on actually implementing the clauses. So it's probably useful to do that first, and then you can go and download the correct set of clauses. I would also advise going back, as you mentioned, Paul, and just checking your contracts. Check particularly clauses that might prohibit data transfers outside of the EEA. I'm seeing that a lot with my clients. It's a standard clause that was put in whenever the GDPR first came into force. But obviously, following the end of the transition period, we are not going to be part of the EU, so you might just need to update the terminology in that clause so that it still applies. And I would say, again, check the definition clauses in your contractual agreements, because I'm noticing in a lot of them, data protection legislation is a defined term and it's only covered by the EU GDPR and Data Protection Act 2018. So you might need to put in a phrase, just any subsequent or replacement legislation, or you could refer explicitly to the UK GDPR. So that's probably my next tip. You'll also just want to keep up to date with the guidance. As I mentioned, the ICO has many great resources. The European Data Protection Board as well publishes guidance. InvestNI has a lot of stuff up on EU exit. I did a webinar for InvestNI on EU exit and data transfer, so that's available. And then there's also some frequently asked questions up there as well. Another point, again, I don't want to get too bogged down in this, is you might want to consider if you need to appoint a representative. So this could apply if you have no office based in an EU country, but you are offering goods or services there or monitoring the behaviour of data subjects. So that's another consideration. But again, we're waiting on more guidance on that. It's quite a vague concept, and I think it's generating a lot of confusion. And I'm noticing that businesses are generally sort of holding off on the representative point at the minute in the hope that more clear guidance comes through on that.
Okay, excellent, John. Thanks a million for that. That was really practical. And those links, you might just send them through to us.
I'll put them in now. Yep.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. You could do that. That's brilliant. Deirdre, any further advice from yourself there before I move back to Seamus?
No, it's just there's plenty of work to do, and it's the same story. Just if you haven't done anything, do a little bit every day.
Yeah, and Seamus, just maybe give the final word to yourself there. I guess it's we wait until we see what comes out of the tunnel, and maybe when we've 25 days to go, we may have a bit more information.
Yeah, I think, if we'll know more with a trade deal. The closer aligned we are, that lowers the risk profile. So if we have a close trade deal where there's maybe minimal tariffs, I don't think we'll get to a 0-0 tariff agreement, but it just means basically the risk profile on goods entering Northern Ireland from GB are a lot lower. So the need for checks is a lot lower, therefore. Because that was the fear. If we walked away, like some people wanted a no deal, WTO, that meant the highest threshold of checks, both for customs and for the regulatory controls on food and things like that. And I think it was quite interesting, probably going off the way, I think probably events in America last week maybe made the chances of a deal a bit better, and maybe those regulatory controls as well a bit more bearable for us to work with in the future. So I think that was a bit of a blessing for us really in the long term.
We live in a global economy, Seamus, isn't that that's the reality of it? Very interesting times last week for sure. So you're from what you're sounding there, you're quite positive on a free trade agreement being reached.
Yeah, I think so, and I think there was the need, obviously, like UK hauliers, for example, need what's called an ECMT permit to take their goods into the EU. The Department for Transport in London wrote out there about a week and a half ago to Northern Irish hauliers, just saying, oh, by the way, you don't need a permit to go into the Republic of Ireland. Now, that was an agreement from the EU. It was a bit like me, Paul, standing outside your house and just telling members of the public, you can go in and park in Paul's Drive, it's fine. It takes your agreement as well. And that's what, now, the word is from the EU is that, yeah, they're very warm and receptive to that, but they're saying we'll agree to this all-island free access for haulage as part of the wider trade deal. So they've banked it, they've told the UK, you can have it, but on the proviso of that trade deal. So it's a good sign when the DFT wrote out to Northern Ireland hauliers saying you don't need a permit, because it's telling us that the UK wants the deal.
Well, that's really good to know. That's really good to know. Yeah, no, and thanks so much, Seamus, for keeping us abreast of all that information. Breaking news, Sky News with Seamus. We just need a little run script underneath your picture there. Look, thanks a million for everyone. Just check if there are any more questions there. I don't think we have any for the moment. It's just to say on behalf of the Chamber, I'd like to thank Joanna, Deirdre and Seamus again for supporting our members today. The links, Joanna, thanks so much for putting the links up there.
No problem.
We have a copy of those obviously with the recording this morning. We'll send them out to our members as well, so they can, there's plenty of information to access. If anybody needs any help, please come on to the Chamber. We're here to help, and we can put you and point you in the right direction. We understand, look, it's a challenging time for businesses, there's no doubt about that. And particularly now we're waiting to see what information is going to come out of the executive in relation to what we're going to do with hospitality, and this uncertainty doesn't help the situation, that's for sure, from our members' perspective, but hopefully we get some clarity and clear direction by the close of business today. That, along with Brexit, is a very challenging time, but I really do appreciate your time trying to provide clarity to our members on this. And Joanna, thanks so much for your GDPR input there as well. It's been really helpful. So just nothing further to say except just have a wonderful afternoon, and thanks again for joining.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.